Okay, in this video I want to talk about Nietzsche and Schopenhauer. Friedrich Nietzsche and Arthur Schopenhauer. Nietzsche was highly influenced by Schopenhauer, um, and Schopenhauer in um, World as Will and Representation as well has a few essays on pessimism or nihilism, whatever you want to call it. The pessimism and nihilism are two different concepts, but we're kind of getting at the same thing here. Um, or at least I want to kind of get into the same thing here and not kind of focus on how nihilism and pessimism are different in more modern ways of looking at the two. But Schopenhauer had a pessimism. If you read World as Will and Representation, he discusses a will. Of course, he discusses a will and a idea. As World as Will and Ideas is another translation or title of that book. Schopenhauer does give a idealism. That is his epistemology of how we see the world. That everything that we see is conditioned by cognition. But there is a will, and the will is the thing in itself, and the will and the representation or the idea is the objectification of the will, and the will is the thing in itself. And there's a innermost nature or inner nature of the world that is a aimless and blind and striving thing towards a certain thing that is not discerned. The will doesn't have a purpose. The will is just this thing that is striving towards something that it doesn't really have a goal or a purpose. Therefore, if there's no purpose, then it's striving towards nothing, and it cannot be satisfied. And he looks at existence, Schopenhauer does, as conflict, struggle, and suffering and dissatisfaction. And the attainment or the getting a goal or achieving a goal is how Schopenhauer looks at being satisfied. Since there is no goal or there is no purpose, that is the frustration of the attainment, which is suffering. Therefore, that's all the world is, because the will is the thing in itself. That's just the way the world is. It's suffering. The intellect, or the reason of humans, causes suffering to become more clear, and it kind of magnifies it, because the more you live through, the more suffering you go through, the more you're going to look at your sufferings, the more your reason will be sharpened, and therefore you kind of magnify your sufferings, and it makes everything worse. Humans cannot change as to how much they suffer. They cannot. There's just there's nothing that anybody can do, and it's better to not exist. And there are antinatalists on YouTube, like Emendum, and there are a lot of others that are on YouTube. And there's one who wrote a book, Better Never to Have Been, that I forget his name. I cannot remember it, but it's called Better Never to Have Been. That is kind of a really, really, really concise argument for antinatalism. And antinatalism is the argument that we should not breed. We should not have children, because having a child is to bring more suffering into this world and create another soul that is going to suffer. Not a soul, but create another mind that is going to suffer further. So Schopenhauer does come to the conclusion that to not exist is preferable. And that is something that influenced Nietzsche. That influenced Nietzsche a great deal. All of Schopenhauer's philosophy. And then basically pessimism is that. It's that idea of looking at the will, or looking at the world in general as, not as something that is not something that you cannot really obtain, or you cannot really, a goal that you cannot obtain. You can't make things better. It's just the world is suffering, basically, is the way you're looking at it. Nihilism is what Nietzsche is kind of always arguing against, or he doesn't really argue. He kind of writes aphorisms and writes, these are like parables, or like or stories even, that just kind of, they're not really stories, but it's hard to explain what these things in this book of this Zarathustra is. But nihilism is to understand that there is nothing in this world. There's nothing that we can hope for or look for. There's no purpose. There's nothing. That's kind of one way of looking at it. Nietzsche, like Schopenhauer, they were both atheists. They did not believe in any kind of higher power at all. And Schopenhauer's conclusion, with, out of all his metaphysics and his idealism and all that stuff, kind of came down, and that's kind of what his pessimism is sort of derived from, his metaphysics of the will. And Schopenhauer's conclusion was that there's nothing we can do. Nietzsche wants to redeem that. He wants to kind of argue against that. There's nothing we can do. Nietzsche recognizes that there's no inherent purpose or divine being that does govern this whole place. But Nietzsche is not gonna agree that there's nothing we can do. Nietzsche in this book is going to try to overcome man, if you will. He has this concept of the Overman, and a little bit in this book you have the concept of the will to power, and mostly Nietzsche was influenced by Schopenhauer's pessimism, and recognizes some of the things about the world that Schopenhauer does, but Nietzsche is going to wants to try to give a way out of this state of a man, of what man is. Man acquiesces to belief systems, acquiesces towards things to make things more comfortable, make things easier, although he's not entirely satisfied, and there's kind of, man is something that's going to possibly look towards a creator, or look toward what is created, or sometimes even look towards something that is transcendent. Nietzsche introduces the concept of the Übermensch, or the Overman, sometimes, in my opinion, wrongly translated as Superman, but the Overman is the overcoming of man. In a way, it's the transformation of the self, in that you are creating a purpose for your life, inserting a purpose where there was inherently none. In this again, like I've said in these past few videos, that you're not trashing a belief system in order to create another that you're going to be subservient to. You are beyond free will, beyond morals, truths, values, and norms. You are beyond all of that if you truly overcome man. And in this book, he kind of gives you a way of life, a way of living, which is the way the Overman lives. And I've been doing a section by section series of this book, and I think I've gotten up to 14 or 13. So I kind of wanted to contrast here Nietzsche versus Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer had a pessimism in that there's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can do to better the state of man. There's always suffering, and the will strives towards something which it will never achieve because it has no purpose. There's nothing we do. non-existence is preferable, where Nietzsche says that there's something that we can do to overcome man, and that's to overcome the state of man itself, to transform into something different, to be a creator of a purpose that you insert into your life, which is beyond all kinds of truths, values, norms, or morals. So let me know if I missed anything up, or if you think I should have added something, comment below, or if you have a question, also let me know below. Thank you.